Imagine a peaceful corner of the Belgian Ardennes, where the dense forest stretches as far as the eye can see, and the sound of birdsong fills the air. It's a quiet retreat, the kind of place where families come to relax, where tourists enjoy the simplicity of nature, and where the crackling of campfires and laughter create a sense of security. This is Green Valley, a popular tourist camp, tucked away in the heart of the forest. The days are warm, and the nights are calm, giving off the illusion of safety, a perfect getaway for those seeking solitude and tranquility. Among the visitors to Green Valley that summer was Marin, a 29-year-old French woman with a love for organization and order. Her life was defined by meticulous planning, whether it was work or her personal time. She wasn't the type to venture into the unknown without a well-structured plan. Her trip to the Ardennes had been carefully mapped out months in advance, every route, campsite, and piece of equipment listed with precision. Marin had always preferred solo adventures, relishing the time alone to reflect and connect with nature. But when she arrived at Green Valley, the summer of 2001 should have been a time of serenity for Marin. She had carefully planned every detail of her solo hiking trip in the Belgian Ardennes. She had chosen Green Valley, a popular tourist camp nestled in the heart of the forest, a place renowned for its quiet surroundings and safe environment. She had arrived early, set up her tent at the edge of the forest, and spent the evening cooking her dinner, enjoying the solitude of the forest. As night fell, she sat by her tent, reading a book, the peacefulness of the camp surrounding her. That was the last time anyone saw her. The next morning, things took a strange turn. Her tent, usually a welcoming sight in the morning light, remained closed. At first, no one thought much of it. Perhaps she had left early for a hike or simply decided to sleep in. But by lunchtime, when Marin's tent remained eerily silent, concerns started to grow. A couple from Germany, staying nearby, called out her name. No response. They hesitated, not wanting to intrude, but the sense of unease was palpable. Eventually, they approached the camp administrator, a kindly elderly Belgian man. He brushed it off, assuming she had left on an early morning hike and was just taking her time. But when evening came and still there was no sign of her, he went to check. As he approached the tent, something felt off. He called her name several times, but when there was no answer, he carefully unzipped the tent. Inside, the tent appeared undisturbed, except for one strange detail. Marin's sleeping bag was neatly rolled, and her large hiking backpack stood next to it, almost as though she had stepped out for a moment and would return at any moment. But something was missing. Her essentials were all there: food, her map, wallet with money, and even the keys to her car. But Marin herself was gone. It was a chilling discovery. No one could fathom why she would leave all her belongings behind, least of all her car keys and wallet, without any sign of a struggle. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. What struck everyone as most peculiar was the absence of any evidence. No footprints, no disturbance in the surrounding area, no screams or signs of a struggle. It was as though the ground had swallowed her up. The authorities were called immediately. They began a comprehensive search of the area. The Belgian police cordoned off the campsite, bringing in search dogs, helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras, and volunteers to comb the dense forest. The search stretched for miles, covering everything from the campsite to the surrounding hills and ravines. But after days of searching, there was still no trace of her. The dogs picked up a scent near the tent, but it was as though it vanished midway along a gravel path that led out of the camp. The most perplexing part was that Marin's car was still parked at the campsite, left untouched, as if she had never planned to leave. How could a person simply vanish like this? The police were left with nothing but questions and dead ends. The theory of an accident was quickly dismissed. The area around the campsite had been thoroughly searched, and no sign of a fall or injury had been found. The next theory was that Marin had disappeared voluntarily, but this seemed out of character for her. Her family and friends were adamant. She was not the type to disappear without any word. She had no history of depression, no apparent reason to run away. The idea of her walking off without taking any of her belongings simply didn't make sense. And then there was the darkest theory: kidnapping. But even this left too many questions unanswered. Why would anyone take Maren and leave everything she owned behind? Usually, in kidnapping cases, the motive is money or some form of extortion, but in this case, nothing had been stolen. The investigation was at a standstill. As the weeks turned into months, the case seemed to fade from the public consciousness. Maren's story became one of those strange disappearances that people talk about in passing, their intrigue quickly fading into the background noise of daily life. The campsite continued to operate, with new tourists arriving each week, completely unaware of the eerie mystery that had unfolded just months before. The search was officially called off, the case archived, and the authorities had little more to go on than a few flyers with Maren's face still posted on trees, faded by time and weather. The case lingered in the mind of the lead investigator, Jean-Pierre Laurier, who, years later, admitted that it haunted him. The total lack of evidence left him with an unsettling feeling, as though something was slipping through his fingers. The feeling of helplessness gnawed at him, knowing that the most important clue could still be out there, somewhere just out of reach. But it wasn't until 3 years later that the mystery of Maren's disappearance would take a shocking turn. One fateful day, it was an unsettling discovery, but it was just the beginning of a far darker story. The box, which had been buried under the feet of hundreds of tourists for 3 years, had contained far more than just Maren's body. As the investigation unfolded, what they would uncover about her fate would send shockwaves through the community, revealing not just a tragic death, but a sinister truth that would make even the most seasoned detectives shudder. 3 long years had passed since Maren vanished into thin air. Her case had grown cold, a forgotten mystery tucked away in the archives of the local police. The Green Valley campsite had moved on, and life continued as usual for the tourists who camped there every summer, oblivious to the chilling disappearance that had once occurred in their midst. But fate has a strange way of pulling the past back into the present. It began one ordinary day when workers arrived at the campsite to lay new electrical cables. They dug along the same gravel path where Maren's trail had mysteriously ended all those years ago. The work was slow and tedious, as the ground had become compacted over time. But as the digger's bucket hit something hard with a hollow thud, the workers paused, puzzled. It wasn't the sound of a stone or a rock, it was something different, something unsettling. Curiosity got the better of them. They stopped the machinery and began to dig manually. As they unearthed the object, it became clear that it wasn't just discarded rubbish, as they had initially assumed. It was a large industrial plastic container, nothing like the ordinary storage boxes one might expect to find. It was rough, gray, and designed to withstand harsh conditions, with metal latches on the sides, suggesting it had been used for industrial or military purposes. At first, the workers didn't know what they had found. It could have been old camp equipment, or perhaps a forgotten relic from a past era. They struggled to free the box from the earth, their curiosity growing with each passing minute. When they finally pried open the lid, a sharp, acrid chemical smell filled the air, causing them to recoil. It wasn't the putrid stench of a decaying body. It was something much more unnatural, like formalin or some kind of industrial solvent. But underneath that chemical odor, there was another sickeningly sweet scent, almost sickly in its sweetness. With trepidation, one of the workers lifted the lid fully, revealing what lay inside. The sight that greeted them made their stomachs turn. There, wrapped tightly in thick black plastic, was a body. It was curled up in a fetal position, as if the victim had been crammed into the box while alive. The plastic was stretched taut around the body, binding it tightly within its confines. The workers immediately realized that they had just uncovered something far worse than they had imagined. Shaken, they hurried to alert the authorities, their minds reeling from the discovery. Within hours, the camp was transformed into a crime scene. The police quickly arrived and forensic teams began their work. They had no idea what they were about to uncover. The body was carefully removed from the box and transported to the local forensic lab. What the pathologists would find there would shatter everything the investigators thought they knew about this case. At first glance, it was obvious that the body belonged to Maren. The facial features, the clothing, everything matched her description. But the condition of the body left the forensic experts stunned. Despite being buried underground for 3 years, the body had not fully decomposed. Instead, it was in a state of partial mummification, remarkably well preserved. This was not a natural process. It was clear that the body had been deliberately treated with something to prevent decomposition. Further tests confirmed that embalming fluid or a similar chemical had been used to preserve the body. The box had acted as price, a sealed container, preserving the body in an almost pristine state. But the real horror lay in the details. As the forensic team examined the body more closely, they discovered signs of something far more sinister. Small metal staples were found embedded under each of Maren's fingernails and toenails, staples typically used in construction staplers. It was a chilling sign of torture, a deliberate attempt to inflict pain without leaving any visible marks on the skin. This wasn't a death by accident or a simple murder. This was sadistic, calculated, and brutal. The cruelty didn't end there. A more disturbing discovery was made when the experts examined the inside of the plastic box itself. Along the inside lid, they found a series of deep scratches. They were parallel, organized, as though they had been made by fingernails desperately trying to claw their way out of the box. It was clear that Maren had been alive when she was sealed inside the container, confined in complete darkness, unable to escape. She had tried to get out, scratching at the lid with all her might, until her fingers bled. The implications of these findings were horrifying. Maren had not just been murdered, she had been subjected to unimaginable pain and terror while she was still conscious. The thought of being trapped inside a plastic coffin, buried alive, and subjected to such cruelty was almost too much to bear. It was a nightmare made real, and for the investigators, the case was no longer just a disappearance. It was now a story of deliberate, cold-blooded murder. The investigation took on a new urgency. The police now had concrete evidence that something far more sinister had occurred than anyone had anticipated. But as they dug deeper, it became clear that this was not just a random act of violence. Someone had gone to great lengths to ensure that Maren's body would never be found. The question now was, who would have the knowledge and expertise to carry out such a gruesome act? As the investigation unfolded, the case began to take on an even darker tone. The more they learned about the way Maren was killed, the more they realized that whoever had done this was not just a killer, but a person with a deep understanding of how to avoid detection, how to keep a body hidden, and how to ensure it stayed hidden for years. This was a person who had taken great care to make sure the crime would never be solved, leaving no trace of their identity. And with each new revelation, the mystery deepened, drawing everyone closer to the chilling truth. As the investigation deepened, one name began to surface again and again. Luc Verhoeven, a seasonal security guard at the Green Valley campsite during the summer of Maren's disappearance, quickly became the prime suspect. Initially, he had been just another unremarkable member of the camp staff, someone who worked quietly and kept to himself. But now, with the discovery of Maren's body, everything about him started to seem suspicious. Luc had been working the night shift on the night Maren vanished. His job was simple: patrol the campsite, keep an eye on the perimeter, and ensure that nothing out of the ordinary happened. Yet there was something unsettling about his presence that now seemed to take on a more sinister tone. He was the last person to have any kind of contact with the camp's security system before it went mysteriously offline on the night of Maren's disappearance. That alone was enough to cast suspicion on him, but it was his background that would make investigators believe he might be more than just a witness. He could be the killer. As the investigation team dug deeper into Luke's life, a chilling pattern began to emerge. Luke Verhoeven was no ordinary security guard. He wasn't just a quiet man who preferred his own company. His past was more complex, more disturbing than anyone had imagined. Before working at Green Valley, Luke had spent several years as a survival instructor. He had taught civilians how to survive in the wilderness, how to track animals, how to live off the land, and, most importantly, how to remain undetected. The skills he had acquired were perfect for someone who might want to carry out a crime in a remote location and avoid being caught. His knowledge of the Ardennes forest, its trails, and its hidden corners made him an ideal candidate to carry out such a heinous act without leaving a trace. He knew exactly where to go and how to cover his tracks. He understood the best places to hide a body and, more disturbingly, how to keep it hidden for years. For a man like Luke, the forest was not just a place of solitude, it was a place of opportunity. But there was more. Before his work as a survival instructor, Luke had been employed at a large chemical company, the same company that supplied the factory that made the plastic containers in which Maren had been found. The company produced industrial products used in various sectors, including chemical storage. It was here, at this company, that Luke had learned about the chemicals that could preserve a body, preventing it from decomposing. He had the knowledge and the access to the tools necessary to carry out a crime of this nature. Investigators now found themselves confronted with an increasingly troubling picture. Luke had both the opportunity and the expertise to commit such a crime. He had worked at the campsite during the time of Maren's disappearance, had access to the security systems, and had the skills to carry out the murder in such a cool, calculated, and horrifying way. His background in survival training gave him an intimate knowledge of the campsite and its surroundings, and his work in the chemical industry had likely given him the understanding of how to preserve the body. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew how to cover his tracks. The more investigators uncovered about Luke's past, the more the pieces of the puzzle began to fit. He was a man who seemed to be in the right place at the right time, with the right skills to carry out the perfect crime. But despite all the circumstantial evidence, there was still a huge problem. There was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. No fingerprints, no DNA, no physical evidence that could definitively tie him to Maren's murder. It was a haunting situation for the investigators. They had their prime suspect, but they could not pin the crime on him without more concrete proof. As weeks turned into months, the case reached an agonizing standstill. The police had no physical evidence to charge Luke, and without it, they could not proceed with an arrest. The mounting frustration weighed heavily on the lead investigator, who, despite his gut feeling, knew that without undeniable proof, this case would fall apart in court. It was a dismal prospect, one that left him with a sense of profound helplessness. The investigation team was caught in a tight spot. They were so close to the truth, yet there was nothing they could do to prove it. They had uncovered a disturbing amount of information about Luke, but none of it was enough to make a case that would stand in a court of law. And so, with no direct evidence, Luke was released, walking out of the police station as if nothing had happened. His face was calm, his expression unreadable. He said nothing, did nothing, just walked away into the shadows, as if he had never been a suspect at all. For the investigators, the case of Maren's disappearance and murder would haunt them for the rest of their careers. They had come so close to unmasking a killer, but without the necessary evidence, they were forced to let him go. The investigation into Luke Verhoeven ended there, but the questions remained. Had the police been right? Was he truly the killer, or had they been chasing a ghost all along? The case, like so many others before it, slipped back into the depths of uncertainty, with no answers and no closure. In the end, despite the mounting evidence and the chilling details uncovered about Luke Verhoeven's past, the case of Maren's disappearance remained unsolved. The police had their prime suspect, but without definitive proof, Luke was never convicted. The lack of closure left both the investigators and Maren's family in a perpetual state of uncertainty. The haunting truth was, there was no answer, no justice for what happened to her. Luc walked free, and his fate remained unknown. It was as though he had simply vanished once again, slipping into the shadows, leaving behind only questions and fear. The Green Valley campsite, once a tranquil spot for visitors, never fully recovered from the dark cloud that hung over it. After the body of Maren was discovered, tourism to the area dwindled. The once bustling camp was soon abandoned, its gates rusted and overgrown with ivy. The once popular destination, where families had pitched tents and laughed around campfires, was now just a quiet, eerie place that no one dared visit. In the end, the camp was shut down, and the story of Maren's tragic fate became one more dark chapter in the forgotten history of the Ardennes. Yet, the mystery remains. The case is still open, and Maren's story continues to echo in the quiet corners of the forest. Luc Verhoeven remains at large, his true role in the crime still shrouded in darkness. The unsettling question lingers: who was responsible for her suffering, and why has no one been brought to justice? It's a question that might never be answered. If you've been captivated by this chilling tale, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories and mysteries that will keep you at the edge of your seat. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Who do you think is responsible for Maren's tragic end? We'd love to hear your theories. Until next time, stay curious and always question what you think you know.